There is an investigation underway in the state of Iowa about who has been trying to vote and whether they did so illegally. There are also state and federal efforts underway to try to convince you that voting is safe and secure despite what you may have read on the internet. Hi, I'm Dave Price. Let's start with that Iowa investigation. Iowa Secretary of State Paul Pate has flagged 2,022 people who he says may have either voted illegally or registered to vote illegally. These 2,022 people may not be legal citizens of the United States.
Recently, we did a review with the Department of Transportation with an additional component that they got some information from the federal government on that identified some individuals who told the DOT that they were not U.S. citizens. And when we cross-checked that, they were registered voters. And in some of those, they actually had a record of voting. So we had to do a little more investigating of our own, and based on that, we turned over a certain group of names for investigation and potential prosecution. But the big number, the 2,000 number, let's be clear about that. We don't know their status yet, because driver's licenses are for more than 1 year. They're several years. So when they got a driver's license, they may not have been a citizen, but they may have become one since then.
Now let's discuss this pushback against all the lies and misinformation about voting. Paul Pate has been involved in this for weeks to try to set the record straight on a lot of this. And this week we also heard from some federal officials. I took part with other journalists from around the Midwest for this briefing about election misinformation.
The machines that Americans use to vote are not connected to the internet. Second, over 97% of registered voters will cast their ballot in jurisdictions where they will have a paper record that they themselves can verify. Third, election officials have put in place multiple safeguards, physical security, cybersecurity, to protect election infrastructure from compromise. These includes pre-election testing of equipment and post-election audits to ensure accuracy.
Now let's talk about threats. As we previously reported, about 24 states are dealing with threatening packages mailed to election officials, including Iowa. Now, the FBI has not disclosed a lot so far, but we do know that at least some of these packages included a white powder. Fortunately, it sounds like this powder was harmless. Now, the FBI has not yet said if this is the same person or the same group responsible for all of these threatening situations. But threats overall seem to be unprecedented in 2024, and some of this is coming from overseas.
There is a diverse and growing number of foreign actors who are looking to influence our elections process. The top three actors that we see in this space, Russia, Iran, and China, and all of them share the same objectives. One, to undermine the American public's confidence in our democratic institutions, and two, to continue to sow partisan discord.
Another one of the things that state and federal elections officials are trying to do sounds pretty simple, but it's just the reminder that the people involved in this, whether they are elected officials or whether they are poll workers, they're not a bunch of evil people and a bunch of troublemakers. They're people you might know.
Election officials are not faceless bureaucrats. They're our friends. They're our neighbors. They could be our family members. They're folks we see in the community every day. And they're not doing this for pay or glory. They're doing it because they believe in our democracy and they believe that it's the right thing to do to stand on the front lines defending our democracy as election officials and election workers. And they deserve our support, our gratitude, and they deserve to be safe.
Time now for the Inside Iowa Politics Final Five. Number one, the investigation. The Iowa Secretary of State flagged 2,022 people who may not be citizens, but who still tried to get involved in the election process. There's a lot of uncertainty about how to proceed here. So what do county auditors and poll workers do on election day if any of these flagged people try to vote? They're still waiting on guidance about this. Number two, The briefings. The Secretary of State holds weekly briefings. They're on Thursdays with the 99 county auditors. They're talking about misinformation, the threats, voter information, all of those things. It's constant communication every week about what's going on. Number 3, another event. Now, this Wednesday, the Secretary of State will again hold a news conference about election security. He will be joined by state and federal election and security officials. Number 4, the main voice. It is interesting that this Republican Secretary of State, Paul Pate, is essentially the main voice when it comes to pushing back against this misinformation. Now, it's kind of a tricky situation, if you will, for some of these key Republicans, because one of the loudest voices on this is the Republican presidential nominee, Donald Trump. He's been saying for years about all of this fraud, and that's the reason why he lost. And in our state, the Republican governor and the 4 Republicans who are in Congress who are running for re-election, they all support Donald Trump. They are not out there with Paul Pate at these events trying to reassure people that widespread fraud is not happening and voting is safe and secure. It is largely Paul Pate on his own in this situation. Number 5, the challenge. When you step back and look at all of this, look at what election officials are dealing with right now. There is so much false stuff out there. Whether people are saying things that they know are not true or they just don't know any better, regardless of the situation, there is so much false information out there. So Paul Pate can have these frequent news conferences, but it's still difficult to get the correct information out to people, especially for people who believe that fraud has to be the reason why their guy did not win 4 years ago, despite the evidence to the contrary. This is a big problem for our communities as we look ahead to November 5th, 2024, and how many problems some people have believing the truth. Thanks for joining us.